It was a typical Friday night in my quiet suburban neighborhood in Denver, Colorado. I just settled in after a long week of work, picking up some takeout from the local Panda Express and planning to catch up on the latest episode of Stranger Things. With the rest of the house bathed in the warm glow of my living room lamps, everything felt perfectly normal. My dog, Max, curled up on his favorite spot on the couch, and the only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning. I was looking forward to a relaxing evening alone, completely unaware that the tranquility was about to shatter. About an hour into the episode, I heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping coming from the back of the house. At first I thought it was just the pipe settling or maybe Max's collar jingling, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more erratic. I paused the show and listened intently, the thumping now accompanied by an occasional dragging sound. I checked the windows and doors, but everything seemed locked and secure. With a growing sense of unease, I decided to investigate, but every step I took seemed to amplify the eerie sound. I followed the noise to the basement door, which was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment, then pulled the door open slowly. The basement was dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. As I descended the stairs, the thumping grew deafening, and I could see a shadowy figure darting around the corner. My heart raced, and I called out, hoping to catch the intruder by surprise. But as I rounded the corner, there was no one in sight, just the faint scent of cigarette smoke and a disarray of boxes. Returning upstairs, I noticed something even more alarming: dark silhouettes moving past the living room windows. My initial thought was that it was just some late-night revelers, but the movement was deliberate and slow. I crept to the window, carefully peeking through the blinds. Outside, the street was empty, but there was a figure standing near my car. The streetlight cast a long, menacing shadow, and I could make out the shape of someone, or something, lurking in the darkness. My phone rang suddenly, making me jump. It was a blocked number. Hesitating, I answered, but all I heard was heavy breathing on the other end. I hung up immediately, my pulse quickening. I tried to call back, but the number was disconnected. I felt trapped, unsure of whether to stay inside or venture out to investigate. The strange phone call seemed to be taunting me, intensifying the already palpable tension. As I paced around the house, the lights began to flicker sporadically, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The power seemed to be fluctuating, and every time the lights went out, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I checked the circuit breaker, but it was in the on position. The flickering grew worse, almost as if someone was playing with the electrical system. Each sudden burst of darkness made the house feel even more alien and threatening. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the hallway, deliberate and heavy. I grabbed a flashlight and moved cautiously towards the sound. But as I turned the corner, there was no one there. Instead, I found a pair of muddy footprints leading from the back door to the living room. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see the marks of a struggle. Chairs overturned and a lamp broken. Someone had definitely been in my home. In a panic, I decided to call 911. But as I was dialing, I heard a loud crash from upstairs. I raced up the stairs, the weight of every creak underfoot amplifying my fear. As I reached the top, I found my bedroom door wide open and my belongings scattered. I saw the silhouette of a person moving swiftly in the dark. I confronted the intruder, but they seemed to vanish into the shadows, leaving me alone with a mess and a pounding heart. Desperate, I searched the house for clues, hoping to understand who had been terrorizing me. In my bedroom, I discovered a hidden compartment in the closet that I had never noticed before. Inside, there were photographs of my house taken from various angles, as well as a journal filled with disturbing notes about my routines and habits. It was clear that whoever had been watching me knew me far too well. As I reviewed the journal, I noticed a disturbing pattern. The entries detailed times when I was out of the house, suggesting that my stalker was tracking my every move. The realization that someone had been silently following me made my skin crawl. I tried to focus on a plan to escape, but each time I heard a noise, I feared it might be the end of my attempts to evade this nightmare. With no other options, I decided to leave the house and drive to the nearest police station. I carefully made my way to the garage, avoiding any further contact with the mysterious figure. Just as I was about to get into my car, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I ducked into the shadows, holding my breath, and watched as the figure approached my car. It was a nerve-wracking gamble, whether to confront them or escape while I still had the chance. As I made my way to the police station, I could feel the weight of the situation still pressing on me. When I finally arrived, I was met by officers who took my statement and began investigating. To my horror, I later learned that the figure stalking me had a long history of similar crimes in the area, but they had never been caught. The realization that this was just another chapter in a terrifying pattern of behavior left me with a chilling sense of unease. As I lay in bed that night, every creak of the house seemed to echo the fear of that night, reminding me that the horror might not be over yet. My name is Julie, and what started as an ordinary evening quickly turned into a nightmare I can't shake. It was late August, and the summer heat still clung to the air as I settled into my small suburban home in Springfield, Illinois. I had just finished watching a rerun of Friends on Netflix and was preparing a snack when I heard a peculiar noise coming from the backyard. It was a regular Tuesday night, and my husband was out of town on a business trip. I had planned to enjoy a quiet evening alone, but the distant repetitive thud was out of place. My initial thought was that it might be some neighborhood kids playing, but as the noise grew louder and more rhythmic, an uneasy feeling began to settle in. The sound seemed to originate from behind the thick oak tree near the fence line that separated our backyard from the neighbor's property. As I ventured closer to the window to get a better view, my heart began to race. I peered through the blinds, and despite the warm evening, a chill ran down my spine. The thud was consistent, almost as if someone was hammering something into the ground, but the yard was dark, and I couldn't make out anything. I rationalized it as a misplaced tool or some other benign explanation, but the discomfort lingered. I tried to shake off the feeling, returning to my snack, but the unsettling noise continued, gnawing at the edge of my calm. Just as I was about to dismiss it and head to bed, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Through the slight gap in the blinds, I saw a shadowy figure moving erratically near the edge of my yard. My breath hitched as the figure seemed to flit between the shadows, making it hard to discern any specific details. The figure was tall and oddly shaped, moving in a jerky, unsettling manner. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light or a neighbor walking their dog, but the figure's erratic movements and the inexplicable noise made it hard to ignore. I decided to call the police, just in case. When I checked the window again, the figure had vanished, but the thudding noise had stopped. I was still on edge as I waited for the police to arrive. I decided to step outside and see if I could find any clues. As I walked towards the area where I had seen the shadow, I noticed something strange in the soil beneath the oak tree, a series of small, unevenly spaced holes. I knelt down to examine them, my flashlight revealing disturbed earth and a strange metallic glint in the darkness. My heart pounded as I realized that whatever had been happening, it wasn't something I could easily explain away. As I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, I heard the unmistakable sound of car tires crunching on the gravel driveway. I quickly glanced at my phone and saw a missed call from an unknown number. My hands trembled as I tried to call the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. Moments later, there was a knock on my front door. My heart skipped a beat. The knock was slow and deliberate, each rap resonating with a disturbing finality. I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole, but saw no one. My unease grew as I considered the possibility of someone deliberately trying to intimidate me. Against my better judgment, I opened the door slightly, peeking outside. To my surprise, no one was there, but the night air felt colder, heavier. I stepped outside cautiously, scanning the darkened street. There was no sign of anyone or any vehicles. I began to retreat back inside when I noticed something on the doormat, an envelope addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. My hand shook as I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a chillingly simple message. "I know you're alone." The message sent a jolt of fear through me. I rushed inside and locked the door, but the sense of being watched persisted. My phone buzzed with a notification, and I saw a text message from an unknown number. "You should have stayed inside." My pulse quickened as I realized the situation was far from ordinary. I called the police again, explaining the new developments, but they assured me they were on their way and advised me to stay calm. I tried to take deep breaths, but every creak of the house seemed amplified in my heightened state of alert. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Just as I was about to attempt some calming activities, my landline rang. I stared at it, my nerves on edge. The caller ID displayed unknown. I hesitated but answered, hoping it was the police. "Hello?" I said, my voice wavering. A chilling silence followed before a voice, distorted and cold, whispered, "I see you." Panic surged through me. I slammed the receiver down and ran to the windows, checking every corner for any sign of movement. My heart pounded as I felt increasingly vulnerable and exposed. The darkness outside seemed to press in on me from all sides. With no immediate sign of anyone outside, I decided to take extra precautions. I locked all windows and doors and barricaded the back door with furniture. My attempts to reach friends or family were met with voicemail or no answer. I tried to stay calm, but the fear of being alone in a potentially dangerous situation was overwhelming. I decided to arm myself with a kitchen knife and prepared to wait for the police, trying to stay alert for any unusual noises or movements. The minutes ticked by slowly, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Just as I thought the situation couldn't get worse, my phone buzzed again with a new text message. This time, it was a photo, an image of my backyard taken from inside my house. The angle was impossible for someone to capture from outside, and the photo showed the exact view from my living room window. I was paralyzed with fear, realizing that whoever was tormenting me was already inside my house. The implications were horrifying. I checked every room, every closet, but found no one. The fear of an intruder hiding somewhere in my home was almost more than I could bear. The tension in the house reached a breaking point. I was in the living room trying to stay as quiet as possible when I heard a noise from upstairs. It was a faint sound, like something or someone moving around. I gathered my courage and tiptoed upstairs, knife in hand. The fear was nearly paralyzing as I crept down the hallway towards the source of the noise. I turned the corner to find my bedroom door slightly ajar, and inside, I saw a figure rifling through my things. With a burst of adrenaline, I lunged forward, screaming, and the figure turned, revealing a man with a twisted smile. The intruder bolted, and I was left shaken and alone once more. The police arrived shortly after, but the man had vanished without a trace. They found no evidence of forced entry or clues about his identity. I was left with the unsettling knowledge that someone had been in my home, watching me, and could return at any time. The house, though now secure, felt like a constant reminder of that night. My sense of safety was shattered, and every creak of the floor or rustle outside sends a shiver down my spine. I remain vigilant, forever haunted by the night I realized that someone knew my deepest vulnerability. It was just another Friday night in my quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, a small town nestled just outside of Seattle. I'd spent the evening like any other, lounging on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, catching up on my favorite TV series, and chatting with friends on social media. My house was dimly lit by the soft glow of the television, and the silence outside was only broken by the occasional distant car passing by. Everything was serene, and I felt secure in my comfortable routine. Little did I know that this ordinary evening would soon take a turn for the unsettling. Around 10 p.m., I heard a faint but distinct scratching noise coming from the back of the house. I paused my show and listened closely, trying to pinpoint the sound. It was odd because the noise was persistent, almost rhythmic, as if someone was methodically dragging something across the ground. I chalked it up to a stray animal, or perhaps a tree branch brushing against the window, but the noise was strangely unsettling. I decided to investigate, checking the back door and peering out into the darkness, but I found nothing unusual. As I returned to the living room, a sense of unease lingered. I dismissed it as overactive imagination until my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from an unknown number. "I see you." My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. I searched the number online but found no results. My mind raced with possible explanations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I tried to calm myself, convincing myself it was a prank, but the eerie message had already unsettled me. Unable to focus on the TV anymore, I decided to check the locks on all the doors and windows. As I moved through the house, I noticed that the back door, which I was certain I had locked earlier, was slightly ajar. My pulse quickened as I shut it tightly, double-checking the lock. The sense of dread grew stronger. I began to wonder if the scratching sound I had heard earlier was more than just a stray animal. I started checking the house more thoroughly, looking for anything out of place. By midnight, I was on edge. The sound of my own breathing seemed loud in the silence, and every creak of the house felt amplified. I kept glancing at the clock, each minute dragging on. The idea of going to bed felt impossible, so I sat in the living room with the light on, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Yet the fear that had settled over me was relentless. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was lurking outside, watching my every move. Just as I was about to turn off the lights and attempt to sleep, I noticed something strange outside the window. A shadowy figure was standing near my driveway, seemingly looking in my direction. I couldn't make out any details, but the presence of someone so close to my home was terrifying. I tried to calm myself, thinking it could be a neighbor or passerby, but the figure's stillness and the time of night made it unnerving. I debated calling the police but hesitated, not wanting to overreact. The doorbell rang suddenly, startling me. I checked the peephole and saw nothing. I waited a moment before opening the door cautiously, but the porch was empty. The only thing there was a small envelope on the doormat. Trembling, I picked it up and read the note inside. "I'm closer than you think." My fear escalated to panic. I locked the door immediately and looked around, but there was no sign of anyone. My safe bubble had burst and I felt exposed and vulnerable. The hours dragged on and the paranoia only grew. I felt trapped in my own home, unable to relax or think clearly. Every sound was magnified and I found myself jumping at the smallest noises. I checked the locks again and again, convinced that someone might break in at any moment. My rational mind struggled to stay in control, but the constant fear made it hard to focus. I kept my phone close, ready to dial 911 if needed, but the thought of making the call and looking foolish was almost as terrifying as the potential danger. Around 3 a.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the porch. My heart raced as I peered through the window blinds and saw a figure moving around the outside of my house. It was the same shadowy figure from earlier. My first instinct was to hide, but I knew I needed to do something. I grabbed my phone and prepared to call the police, but before I could, the figure moved away from the window. I could hear the faint sound of a car starting and then driving off. With the immediate danger seemingly gone, I tried to take stock of the situation. I went outside cautiously, searching for any evidence of tampering or signs of intrusion. I found nothing disturbed, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I scoured the area for any clues, but found nothing to explain the figure's presence or the messages I had received. Exhausted and on edge, I went back inside, locking the door behind me and sitting down with my head in my hands. As the sun began to rise, the events of the night seemed surreal. I was barely functioning on adrenaline and lack of sleep when I decided to review the footage from my home security cameras. To my horror, I discovered that the cameras had been disabled at the exact times of the disturbances. Whoever had been outside my house knew exactly what they were doing. The realization that someone had not only intruded, but had tampered with my security system left me feeling helpless and violated. The next few days were a blur of police reports and restless nights. The investigation turned up no leads, and the messages and encounters remained unexplained. The unsettling knowledge that someone had been watching me, tampering with my home, and evading capture lingered. I moved out of Maplewood soon after, but the fear never fully left me. The nightmare didn't end with my departure. It remained as a haunting reminder of how vulnerable I had been. To this day, the sense of being watched and the unanswered questions continue to plague my thoughts.